I hadn't traveled in years. After retiring, the days stretched endlessly before me. Quiet mornings, slow afternoons, and evenings that blended into one another. Freedom, they called it. But to me, it often felt like an emptiness I didn't quite know how to fill. Going somewhere alone always felt like a burden, and truthfully, I had no one to go with anymore. Friends were busy with families or simply not around. My wife had been gone for years, and though I told myself I was fine on my own, the silence in my apartment often grew too heavy. Then, one ordinary morning, my eyes caught a newspaper ad. One-day bus tour, lunch included, sightseeing and shopping stop. It wasn't anything special, just the kind of promotion that usually made me turn the page. But for some reason, I lingered on it. Maybe it was the picture of a cheerful group standing beside the bus. Maybe it was the word lunch included, something that suggested companionship, even if temporary. Almost without thinking, I picked up the phone and made a reservation. On the day of the trip, I arrived at the departure point a little earlier than necessary. The bus, larger and more comfortable looking than I had imagined, waited at the curb. Around me were couples in their 60s and 70s, women in small groups chatting excitedly, their laughter carrying in the morning air. I quickly realized that a man traveling alone like me was rare here. Climbing aboard, I found my seat and settled in, trying to appear casual. That was when she appeared. Not a guide, not an employee, but simply another participant. She wore a navy dress with a light cardigan, her hair falling softly to her shoulders. Her makeup was modest, yet her eyes held a quiet elegance that made me pause. She glanced at me as I adjusted my bag and offered a small smile. "Looks like we'll be neighbors today," she said softly, sliding into the seat beside me. And just like that, the emptiness of my morning cracked open, letting in a sliver of warmth. I told myself not to stare. "Good morning," she said, turning slightly to face me. As the bus door side closed, "I'm Yumi. First time with this tour company." "Ken," I replied, "first time with any company." I tried a smile. "I'm new at being a tourist." She laughed, not loudly, but with the softness of someone careful, with other people's mornings. Up close, she looked a little younger than I'd guessed at first glance, perhaps mid-50s, with the kind of composure that doesn't come from pretending to be confident, but from surviving years of life's smaller storms. A faint, clean scent, soap or maybe fresh linen, rose. When she adjusted the strap of her bag, the driver made a quick announcement. The engine eased into a steady hum, and the city unspooled beyond our window. In the reflection, I saw the two of us framed side by side, her hands folded on her lap, my fingers fidgeting with the seam of my seat. It felt strangely intimate to watch our silhouettes traveling together, before we'd even earned each other's names. "You came alone?" she asked. "I did." "Me too," she said, as if handing me a small, delicate truth to see if I could hold it without dropping it. I thought about inviting a friend, but sometimes company becomes a job. Today I wanted a day that didn't need managing. I nodded. I told myself I needed fresh air. And then I realized I wanted a voice other than my own. We fell into a gentle rhythm, two strangers assembling a temporary bridge out of ordinary things. The coffee at the departure point too weak. The bus seat surprisingly comfortable. Our reasons for showing up. "I liked the picture in the ad," she admitted. "I liked the idea of lunch included," I confessed. When the guide at the front began pointing out landmarks, Yumi leaned just close enough to see past my shoulder, and the soft edge of her cardigan brushed my arm. It wasn't flirtation, it was what happens when two people share a window. Still, it woke something small and stubborn inside me, like a pilot light catching. By the first rest stop, conversation came easily. It turned out we had both grown up in smaller towns, before drifting toward the city for work. She had studied to be a dental assistant, then switched to office administration when her mother fell ill. I had spent decades keeping machines honest, which is what I used to tell people when they asked what an engineer did. We discovered we were both good at remembering other people's birthdays, and bad at remembering our own blood pressure. "Were you always good with details?" she asked, stirring the tea she'd bought from a vending machine. "I had to be," I said. "Machines are unforgiving. They're like time that way." "People are too," she murmured, and then smiled as if to soften the words. "But sometimes they forgive you late." There was nothing dramatic about her, but I kept noticing how she listened without that quickness people get when they're waiting to insert themselves. How she laughed with her eyes before she laughed with her mouth. I realized I was measuring the day by her, by whether she was near, whether I could hear her comment over the guide's microphone, whether the sunlight found the thread of silver at her temple and made it glow. At the old temple, the morning's main stop, we wandered the path at an easy pace, keeping one another in sight without saying we would. Tourists paused for pictures under a gate, and somewhere a bell sounded low and patient. We read the same small plaque and pretended to be surprised by the same historical anecdote. My knees reminded me I was 68 when we climbed the stone steps. Her hand hovered once, as if to offer help, then retreated, because she understood what I wanted more, the chance to arrive beside her, not behind. "Do you come to places like this often?" I asked, when we sat on a shaded bench. "Not really. But I come to moments like this when I can," she said, schooling a stray hair behind her ear. "A little quiet, something pretty to look at, someone kind to talk to. That's not a place so much as a combination." "I hope I'm the kind part," I said, risking the line. "You are," she replied simply, and the frankness of it, free of coyness, felt like the cleanest compliment I'd received in years. Lunch came and went, a simple set meal shared at a long table, where couples spoke in the shorthand of many years. Across from us, two women debated gifts for grandchildren beside me. A man explained cholesterol with the zeal of a recent convert. Yumi and I compared portions, like conspirators, and traded side dishes without ceremony. At some point, the sleeve of her cardigan slid up, and I saw the inside of her wrist, delicate, faintly veined, the small flutter of pulse, visible just below the skin. It struck me then, absurdly and completely, that beauty is sometimes nothing more than noticing where life beats. After lunch, we had free time. The others drifted towards souvenir shops and the smoking area. I said I'd stretch my legs, and then found myself back at the bus earlier than necessary, drawn by the simple relief of the seat and the quiet. She arrived a minute later, smiling as if we had shared a plan. "Too many choices," she said, lifting a small paper bag. "I bought the first thing I didn't need." "What did you choose?" She held up a bar of handmade soap, wrapped in brown paper with a blue twine bow. "For guests," she said, then added, "I don't have many." She placed it on her bag, the way you set a promise somewhere you can see it. The bus started, and with it, the easy hush of afternoon. The road narrowed, the driver touched the brakes. The world tipped gently forward. It wasn't dramatic, just a quick correction, but it sent a small wave through the cabin. My shoulder bumped hers, her hand reached for the back of the seat, missed and brushed across my fingers. We both laughed, the reflexive laugh of people who have almost dropped something, and then, for a breath, neither of us moved. Her skin was warm. My pulse in my hand felt suddenly visible, the way it does when you hold a glass too full of water. "Sorry," she said, not moving away. "It's all right," I managed. "No damage." She turned her palm slightly, our fingers, aligning for the length of a heartbeat and then breaking apart. When she looked at me, there was no coyness there. No performance, just that quiet elegance again, and a question neither of us tried to name. The guide at the front played old songs for the ride back. Someone called out a request. Someone else sang along under their breath. Yumi leaned her head against the seat and closed her eyes, not to sleep, I thought, but to feel. I watched the small muscles at the corner of her mouth shift with the music, and realized how long it had been since I'd wanted to memorize a stranger. Dusk softened the edges of the world by the time we reached the station. People gathered their bags, murmured goodbyes, took one last picture, as if the bus were a friend. I stood, slinging my small backpack over my shoulder, and felt the familiar tug of the end. How? Endings arrived disguised as ordinary movement. "Ken," she said, as if testing whether the sound of my name would carry outside the bus. She held out the folded brochure we'd been given that morning. "I think you dropped this." It felt too light to be mine. When I turned it over, I saw a line in neat handwriting. "If you're free at 7 p. There's a cafe by the Rotary. I'd like to keep the day going a little longer. Yumi." My heart did that foolish adolescent thing it hadn't done in years. I looked up to thank her, but she was already stepping down to the sidewalk, giving me the small private gift of choosing. The cafe was older than the surrounding storefronts, all warm wood and a bell that chimed low when the door opened. She had chosen a table against the wall, where you could watch people without being watched back. She was early, or perhaps I was late either.